Hello there, Dr. Hahn. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
You're pronouncing it right. Hello
I
there.
went to your site and it's
Mhm.
absolutely amazing. And I think what you offer to the world is so crucial. I think everybody needs to look into what you have to offer. And you are here to, of course, I want you to talk about yourself, but I think your purpose is to help people stop suffering. The only thing I know about stopping suffering, because I've had a lot in my life with a very horrible childhood of like broken bones type abuse,
Mhm.
but I learned how to find the value in it. I am so grateful for everything I've suffered through. Uh, of course, I complained about it a lot until I got older. But if I had not suffered all that, I'd probably be a horrible, selfish, shallow bore. But I learned how to be assertive. I learned how to be a better parent. I learned to have compassion and be super nurturing. So then when I was able to express the gratitude for my suffering, I go, whoosh, let it go. But I want to hear what you have to say. You're on.
Thank you. Well, I think you're right on, actually. And what I have to say is, um, I think when people come in and they're suffering about something, there's two levels you have to always hold. We have to hold people on. One is the level of the humane. And on a human level, when something horrific has happened, the most you can say is that that's a horrific thing that happened.
Yeah.
But on a whole other level, if you don't think that there's anything about healing and growth and soul growth in it, then all you'll ever be is a victim. So it's to try to hold both of those simultaneously, to honor the human suffering and to also say that um, in some way it's served. We may not always know how it's served at the time, but there's always a way that it's helping our healing, our growth, and ultimately, you could say the healing and growth of all of life.
Yeah.
So I guess I would say right on to you. It's what you said is very touching to me.
Well, being a victim is just robbing yourself of your power. And who wants to be? I didn't want to be a pawn on the chessboard. I wanted to be the chess player. But you wanted to tell me a little bit about how you fell into this beautiful endeavor of yours? Stop running
Um,
around, fool dogs. I told you it's life. I don't have my own studio. So you guys rein your dogs in. I'm sorry.
I'll tell you a little bit of how I fell into it, okay? And then I'll tell you about how I think people can, as you say, take back the power and be free, because I think there's a very simple way anybody can do it.
Okay.
And that's what I really want
Okay.
to share with people. How I got involved in this was by training. I'm a clinical psychologist, and so I have a doctorate in clinical psychology. And after that, I was kind of edgy to begin with. And about 4 years after that, I had some very unusual experiences, and um, they ended with an experience where I was visiting a friend who was on spiritual retreat, and she had fallen the day before I met her, and she had very, very, very badly hurt her ankle. This was 1990, I think. And but she wanted to show me a place called the Self-Realization Fellowship. She'd gone on retreat at Yogananda's ashram. And so we were walking around the holy grounds of the fellowship, and she was in so much pain. She said, basically, she sat down and she said, "You're going to have to carry me out of here. I'm in so much pain." And so I sat down next to her, and I didn't actually sit next to her. I actually went to sit in a very strange spot, it turned out, because I wanted her to be able to put her foot up on my leg. So I had to walk to a very strange spot. And the second that I sat down, I was flooded with like a brightness that was really quite inconceivable to me. And I said to her, "Roshan, why don't you just give me your ankle?" And she put her ankle on my leg, and I started just experiencing this energy flowing out through my hands to her ankle.
Ooh.
I did that for about 5 seconds, and then I had a sense it was done. And so I looked up, and she said, "You know, I can read auras, don't you?" And this is 1990, before I knew much of anything. I said, "Roshan, what do I know from auras? I'm a nice Jewish boy from Boston." And she said, "Are you aware that there's pure light coming down through the crown of your head into the center of your chest and out your hands to my ankle?" And I said, "I'm not aware of it the way that you're talking about, but I know what you're saying is true. And then we looked down at her ankle, and it had been really badly swollen and really discolored, and she was in excruciating pain. And there was no swelling, there was no pain, there was no discoloration, and she got up and walked away. At which point I sort of said to myself, we're not in Kansas anymore, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I spent the next 2 years of my life training in everything I could to try to deepen the understanding of what had happened there and how to integrate it with the semi-traditional psychology I was doing. And I did mystery trainings, and I went and studied the mysteries, and I studied energy, and I studied Eastern traditions some, and I studied past life regression therapy, and I studied psychosynthesis, and I studied the Enneagram, which we talked a little bit about, which if people don't know the Enneagram, I think it's the most profound tool for some understanding people from the inside out, and really a profound tool for helping them know what their unique spiritual path is. I studied all this stuff, and that took about 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, I had a meeting with a friend, and she said, this feels more like an interview and I want to do some work with you, but she said, you have to go see this woman, she's doing miracles in New Jersey. And I said, okay. And she told me a story, and the story she told me was that she was at this workshop, and this woman who was running it, whose name was Judith, did a session with a woman who had such a bad case of asthma that she could barely walk up the stairs. She was wheezing so badly. And so what Judith did was, my friend didn't know much about this, but she said she used this process called kinesiology, or muscle testing, which I had never heard of 28 years ago.
Yeah.
And she was muscle testing, and the muscle testing said that this woman was supposed to tap all over her body while she told the story. I said, that's interesting, because I didn't know about acupressure interventions. What?
Is that like EFT, the special?
Yeah, EFT. It was the precursor. It was
Oh.
EFT came out of what's called TFT, which came out of Callahan tapping. And Judith was one of Roger Callahan's original students.
Oh my gosh, you know so much, dude.
I know a lot. It's true.
You do.
Well, what can I tell you?
Yeah, it's what I do.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, she was having him tap all over, having her tap all over her body. And then the muscle testing, the kinesiology said that her asthma was balanced. So the woman, Judith is a strong personality. She said to the woman, why don't you go outside and start to walk and see if you feel any different? And the woman started to walk, and then she started to run, and she ran up and down the street and said, that's kind of weird. She was totally winded. She said, that's weird because I haven't been able to run a step in 7 years. That's the story I was told. And I said, that's interesting. So I went and studied with Judith, and Judith was just starting out. And if you're interested in the history of all of this, I can tell you, although it would take a little while, but Judith and I put together what she knew, which was NLP and a lovely protocol from a craniosacral therapist whose name is Mary Louise Muller, who was an angel, and some her own original research on loss and violence traumas, and the tapping work. And I took everything I knew about psychology and spirituality and energy and what at the time I would have called regression therapy, except I don't believe in regression therapy anymore particularly.
Oh,
Because
really?
I don't think
that.
I'll tell you about that, because I don't think we regress people. So, and I'll tell you why I believe that in a second, because I don't think you could ever be re-traumatized when you're doing healing work. Yeah. And most psychologists think you can, and I'll tell you why they think so, and I'll tell you why I think that I have a different perspective about it. But anyway, so we worked together and put together what we now call life-centered therapy, and she calls healing from the body level up. But her perspective was much more, I would say, Judith is a research scientist and was very built in sort of the medical model, and I'm the soul level psychologist. So you could say that our emphasis was different. And I would say that sort of like, I'll only speak for myself. I'll say I believe very much in healing. And I think healing essentially means one of two things. I don't think it means cure. I think healing and cure aren't the same thing. So when someone comes to me with any kind of difficulty that they're suffering about, I don't care what it is. It could be chronic pain, it could be autoimmune disease, it could be depression, it could be anxiety, it could be bad relationships, it could be alienation. I say to them, I will give you a guarantee that if you finish the work, one of two things will happen. Either your problem will go away, or your suffering about your problem will go away to such a degree that you'll no longer, as you said, you'll no longer think of it, you won't be anxious about it, you won't be judgmental about it, you won't be comparative about it, you will just say, it's just one more thing I'm experiencing that has served life in some way.
Yes.
So you might be sad about it, but you won't be suffering about it.
Oh.
So I'll tell you what I believe about suffering and trauma, because I think suffering and trauma are really the same thing, okay? So I think people only go for healing for one reason, which is that there's something that couldn't be handled and integrated.
Oh.
That is the only, I think trauma is something you can't handle and integrate. And I think trauma is why people suffer. So I think you can call it anything you like, and I'll just say what's going on is there's something you can't handle and integrate, okay? So that makes what healing is very simple. All you're doing is mastering what you couldn't handle and integrate. That's
Can you
healing.
give an example of a particular situation where you could not master and integrate, what that whole integration looks like? Are you talking about, I believe that everything has a spiritual basis, and sometimes it's our soul saying, if you have autoimmune disease, it's your soul saying something like you're taking life for granted, or I don't know.
Well,
Or you
actually,
don't
it's
have
saying something,
enough
I think you're
self-love.
right. I'll tell you what I think, okay? Well, first of all, let me tell you how you do it, all right? And then I'll tell you an example of it. Whenever there's something you can't handle and integrate, in that moment, a discomfort is born. Just like Alisa was born in a moment. Did you say your name Alisa?
Pardon me?
Yes?
Alisa.
How do you say your name? Alisa. Just like Alisa was born in a moment, the discomfort was born in a moment. So when you can't handle and integrate something, immediately in that moment, a discomfort is born, okay? And I would say, so if I say, let's say you're feeling anxious, Alisa, you're saying I'm anxious. And I say, well, when you feel anxious, Alisa, what do you feel in the body? And you say, oh, my throat's closing up. All right, let's suppose. And I say, okay, Alisa, I'm going to say something funny to you. It's not that Alisa's feeling anxious. It's throat closing up. It's feeling anxious. That's its name. Your name is Alisa. Its name is throat closing up. Okay. And throat closing up was born in a moment when something was handled that couldn't be integrated. And so it is a clue about the thing, and your anxiety is a clue about the thing that couldn't be handled and integrated. And what you're going to do is you're going to choose to become the body sensation. Hello, who is ever behind you? And when you choose to become the body sensation, you go from being the one who is the character in a story to the one who is witnessing or hosting the character in the story. And then you're no longer stuck. And I'll give you an example, a simple example of what I mean. And then I'll give you as many stories as you like. Let's suppose someone's in my office and a car backfires and they suddenly have a panic attack, okay? And they say, oh my God, I have a problem. I have problems with cars backfiring. I have panic attacks, okay? And what's really going on with that person is 40 years ago, let's suppose, he was the head of a troop of soldiers in a war zone, all right? And he thinks he should have been more careful, but he wasn't careful enough. And he walks his troops into a ambush, and bombs go off, and many of them die. And he feels, I've betrayed them, okay? So when he isn't able to handle and integrate his sense, I've betrayed them. And I'll give you another story about this, actually. I'll tell you which story I'm going to tell you, and then we can go from there. So he comes in, a car backfires, and he's no longer in my office. He was never actually in my office. He's 40 years ago, reliving that scene over and over and over again, okay?
I see.
Now, the reason he's doing it is he still is that soldier, right? And his problem actually isn't even the bomb going off. In his case, the problem is betrayal, which I could find out. So the bomb going off is only secondary because what's really up for him is he believed he betrayed a trust, and he couldn't handle that. So let's suppose he chooses to become the body sensation, right? So he's having a panic attack and suddenly his throat's closing up, which might be, I can't speak about this, or who knows what it's going to be.
Throat
He
shock
chooses
stuff.
to become the body sensation, and then suddenly I say, okay, throat closing up, where are you beginning? And what have you come to share with us? And what's happening to you? And whatever he says after that is the answer to the question.
Wow.
All right. Now, what may happen is he might say, oh my God, I'm remembering that I'm leading these troops of men and I should have known better, and they're all getting ambushed, and I'm thinking I was a terrible leader and they're dying in front of, okay. So he's down telling his story, but it's not his story, it's throat closings up story, right? Okay. Because nothing's happening to him 40 years later, but throat closing up is still there, okay? And as soon as you do that, you're no longer in the story, you've chosen to remember it. And then the next time the car backfires, instead of being throat closing up, he'll be the one who says, oh, I'm the one over here, and this is reminding me of what happened 40 years ago, but I'm no longer living it out, okay? Yes. And maybe, as you said, I had to learn something about betrayal, or maybe I had to learn something about forgiveness, all of which we'll find out. But as soon as you become it and choose to become it, and you tell its story and you give it, if it needs anything other than just to be able to share its story, the sensation will go away and you will immediately know something is different. Now I'll give you an example like that, because that's just a simple example. Okay. We had a woman who came in, and she said that she was in a horrific accident 7 years before, and she has been in constant back pain ever since. And she was very wealthy, and she had gone to every kind of doctor you could imagine, psychologists, chiropractors, specialists, everything, and nothing was touching it, and nobody knew why. But she said, so she came to one of our demonstrations. She had actually set up a session with me. She had found out about me, but she came to one of our demonstrations, and it said that when I do a demonstration with one person typically. Sometimes I do it with the whole group, but I do it with one person, and it said I was going to do it with her. So she says, look, Andy, I have to tell you, I can't do this sitting down, because if I sit for a couple of minutes, my back starts to hurt so badly that and she said in the beginning, I'm going to have to stand up and down, and I'm sorry if I disturb you, but I can't sit down. So I do some muscle testing, and I ask, if you know what muscle testing is, because I'll explain that to you in a second.
I've read about it before. I can't remember. I thought it was
I'll explain it to you, but let's just say I can do a diagnostic, and I found out. I asked if her back pain was her biggest problem, and it said the most important thing to work on, and it said no. And I kind of have mapped out the universe, and again, it said her biggest problem was betrayal. And all of her back pain was only about betrayal. It wasn't physical, even though she was sure it was physical. It was only energetic. And I found out also that the betrayal story took place not in this lifetime, but in another lifetime that was what's called you can things, I don't know, if I say other lifetimes to you, is that something you're okay with? Like,
yeah, sure, I believe in. But I believe that the past, present, future are all happening right now, that there is no linear time, that's a human construct. I'll just tell you that.
So do I, and that's why I don't think there's anything called regression, because if you're doing regression, then you have to think there's time. All right, so it says, but in a linear time way, it says that this story crystallized in what you call another lifetime in the past, all right? So I have her, and I find out that the thing she needs to work on isn't her back pain, it's betrayal. And I can do that because I've mapped out all of the themes in the universe kind of that people can get stuck in. And it said she was stuck in betrayal. So what I had her do was I had her focus on what happened in her body because she's standing at this point, when she makes a statement with conviction, I betrayed a sacred trust. And when she said that, I checked with her body stayed strong, which meant the answer was yes. And so And when she said it, her back pain, which was not so terrible at the time, became excruciating, okay? So I said, here's what I want you to do. Just bring all your attention to back pain, because back pain has come to share a story about betrayal. And now I'm going to talk to back pain. And I say, back pain, teach us. What have you come to share? Where's this beginning? What's happening? And she brings her attention there and she says, this is very strange. She said, I'm wearing a toga and I'm a Roman general. And I can see that I'm leading this large group, this enormous army, and there's this other army across from us. And I've decided it's a ridiculous thing that these men should all fight and die. So I've gone up to this other general and we've decided we're going to fight each other, and whoever wins, the other army will become slaves to that army. We've made an agreement.
What a deal.
Good deal. So the general goes back to his army and says, I've got this. You guys don't have to fight. You're not going to fight. I've got this. I'm going to make this happen. And what happens is they're in the desert, and the general is a little bit arrogant and a little bit nonchalant. And what happens is, because of that, the other general sort of trips him, and he falls down onto his back, and he's trying to roll over onto his stomach, but then he gets knocked over by a wind gust that all the sand gets blown all over him, and it knocks him down again, and he falls on his stomach, and he sees the other general go behind him, and he sees him lifting up his sword, and the last thing he's thinking is, I've betrayed thousands and thousands of men. And then he says, I think I must have died. Okay. And he's saying this very powerfully. And he said, I think I must have died. So I said, well, you have two problems. Your first problem is you died believing that you betrayed an awful lot of people. And the second problem is you didn't let yourself fully die because you didn't even know you had died. So it was too painful for you. So you dissociated. You left your body before you had actually died. Okay. So you have two problems. The first is your final thoughts are and feelings are only about I've betrayed. And the second problem is you're not even in your body when you die. So you have two problems. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to choose to come back into your body right before you die, and you're going to let yourself fully die. But before you go to the light, which is where most people go to, you're going to go and find the souls of these men, and you're going to do a forgiveness practice and make amends with them. And so he goes and finds the souls of the men, and he has to, what you have to do when you make amends is you just have to say, I want to know what this was like for you. And usually when people are angry at you, they tell you, and all you can do is say, I am so sorry because I did this thing to you. And you don't get defensive. You don't do anything like that. You don't rationalize. You don't get guilty. You just say, what was it like for you? Well, so he finds the souls of the men, and he's ready to be totally castigated. And they start laughing, and they say, we forgave you 2,000 years ago because we had to learn that we could take care of ourselves and fight our own fights, and we've been preparing for this forever, and you wouldn't let us fight. And so we had to learn that we could take care of ourselves, and you weren't going to do such a great job of it anyway.
Uh-oh.
So, okay.
So it was experience, probably a spiritual contract for both of them. Then
exactly.
You got to take care of yourself.
Contract for both of them.
Yeah.
At which point, this woman gets a beatific smile on her face, and she says, I see this light now. And she says, I'm going to this light. And she goes to the light, and she says, I am the light. And then she says, I'm done. Okay, that took about 25 minutes, that whole story.
Wow.
And then what happens is she sits down because she said, I'm tired because she's been standing, I was talking to her and showing her muscle testing and standing. And so she does this, and she sits down, and she starts to talk to people. And I will tell you the story she told about her accident, which is fascinating, okay? She's with a group of other mothers, and all the kids are in the water, and the kids have been training to swim, and they're out and there's no lifeguard, and the mothers are supposed to be watching the kids, right? Well, it's her turn to watch.
Present life, right?
Yeah, present life 7 years ago.
Oh, okay, got it.
Okay, so it's her turn to watch the kids, but she gets preoccupied, and then she looks out there, and it looks like one of the kids is really in trouble. So she races out to try to save this kid. She gets knocked over by a wave, just like she got knocked over by the sand. She falls onto a very sharp rock right in the spot that she had been stabbed in her back. all the kids get out, and she gets dragged out of the water and has been in excruciating back pain for 7 years ever since, and no one can find out why, because no one thought to look. What?
Re-triggered the event.
Well, not only triggered it, I actually think it's something else. I actually think we call these events back to us as a way to try to master them, because the sensations are like magnets. So it's true on one level we get re-triggered, but on a whole other level, you could say on a soul level, we co-create these things in order to heal and grow, all right? So she's telling us this whole story. She's sitting there for an hour. People are saying what their experience were like. They're asking her questions. And after an hour, she says, this is impossible, because I'm not feeling any back pain at all. And I've been sitting for over an hour.
That is in 25 minutes, where she has probably spent, 7 years trying to get some sort of relief. Now, can this also be for like other things like commitment issues, or people who have problems with vulnerability or depression, or people who have a lot of accidents? Like my sister constantly is breaking bones. Can you use it for all those things?
Yes, everything. I've seen people who've been in terrible accidents. I've seen people with horrific depressions. I've seen people with ritual abuse. I saw a woman who I could tell you story after story. I saw a woman who was truly what's called DID, what used to be called multiple personality, with psychotic features, because she thought ants were crawling all over her. That went away in one session. She'd been hospitalized for every year before I saw her, at least once and usually twice, because she was psychotic and she lost time. And I found out what that was, which if I told you what that was, you wouldn't believe me, but we took care of it.
I would believe anything you said.
Well, it was an amazing story, because it's one story I really wish I had on videotape, because what I'll tell you that story just briefly, because it's so moving to me. And what happened was that she had the worst history of anyone I'd ever known. And I've known a lot of histories. I've known people with ritual abuse. She had a history of incest, of multiple rapes. She watched her mother kill her sister right in front of her with a revolver, all of which happened when she was very young. And it said none of this was the cause of her losing all this time and feeling psychotic. It made her predisposed to it, but it wasn't the problem. It said the problem was that some energy took her over. And so I muscle tested, and it said that all of her DID, her multiple personality, and her psychosis was because an energy took her over. And when she was a good reporter, I muscle tested, says, does that make sense to you, that there was this energy, some kind of energy that took you over when you were about 8? And because I muscle test that, and it says that. And she says, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Wow.
I was in this, she was Southern Baptist. She's in her father is giving a fire and brimstone sermon. Now, we won't talk about her relationship with her father, but let's say it was not so pretty. And she was already having a lot of troubles. And she said, this energy came in that day and took me over, and I have never been the same since. And she was seeing a psychiatrist because of other shit that wasn't being talked about. And she told the psychiatrist this, and the psychiatrist said, you're crazy, and put her on Thorazine.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah,
When people are really depressed, or they have a lot of negative emotions, they attract negative entities to them. So that totally makes sense.
Well,
I bet there's a lot of people in psychiatric hospitals that they're hearing voices too, that are really just channeling spirit. So it's
exactly. But if they can't handle and integrate it, then it will be a trauma. And we have words for that, and I can find out that. But in her story, it was just this dark energy that took her over. And so she said, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I told the psychiatrist this, and he said, I'm crazy, and put her on Thorazine. And she said, she made a vow never to tell anyone again. And this was 30 years later, and I'm muscle testing her, and it says her problem is that we call it a superimposition. Something superimposed itself on her. So we go back to when she's 8, she feels it in her body, and I say, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to feel this thing that took you over in your body, but you're not going to be it, you're going to be you. and you're going to focus on the you that's being taken over. And she does that, and then she's doing that, and she's feeling taken over, and it says she knows what to do to take care of it. Okay, which was a shock to both of us. And this woman was 1/16 Native American. She was just getting into all this Native American stuff. And she starts to do this dance in my office that is unlike anything I've ever seen. She's going around in this beautiful spiraling sort of like flower of life shape, right? Which she knows nothing about. And she after about a minute, she looks at me like, what am I doing? And she keeps going. And about a minute after that, you can feel the room shake, kind of, and the room lightens up, and she says, I'm done. And you know how many times that woman was hospitalized after that?
None.
None.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. So
So,
is she more a Native American than Elizabeth Warren? Kidding. I'm kidding.
No, not more American than Elizabeth Warren. If Elizabeth Warren was 1/16 Native American and went out there too, she would have done the same thing with me. So who knows? We can't say. I don't know about it. But anyway, so that's what I do. So basically what I do is you come in and you say, I'm suffering about something, which just means you have a judgment about it, or you're anxious about it, or you're comparative about it, but you're not just saying, okay, so that's what happened. And, it's sort of like, instead of saying, why hast thou, you say, why hast thou forsaken me, as opposed to like, forgive them because they're blind, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same idea. So anytime that you have any kind of anxiety or judgmentalism, you're suffering. So what you do is, you just go into the suffering by feeling the sensation, and then whatever comes is going to be it. And then you only have to be able to do one, but then you have a problem, which is the thing you think is the problem may not be the problem. Like the guy with the car backfiring, his problem was betrayal, right? So he may not know that. So I have to find out what the truest intention is. And it may be something you say, but what you say may just be a symptom of a deeper intention, right?
Right.
Like the woman who has the accident also, same idea. Or the woman who says, my biggest problem is like I lose all this time. That wasn't her problem. The problem was that something took her over and broke her field into pieces, right? So she may not know that. So I have to find out what your highest intention is, and I have to find out where you're stuck, right? Is it when you are, 8 years old, or is it another lifetime, or is it in one of your ancestors, or is it in another dimension? And if you can ask the question, you can find the answer. If you can't think of the question.
Well, I remember now what muscle testing is, but the rest of the viewers might not. I think
I'll tell them.
if it's solid when you touch them, or they don't like not fall over, but go ahead, you explain. And then I also want to ask you if you need to be in person with you to and include the muscle testing, or can you do anything on an online thing? But go ahead about muscle testing.
The way I'll answer your question is I have to tell you about levels of wisdom, okay?
Okay.
And we're going to talk about 4 levels of wisdom. The first level of wisdom is the wisdom of the conscious mind. That's what you can tell me. So I say, Alisa, what's your name? You say, I can figure that out. My name is Alisa. Or I say,
Alisa, Andy.
What?
It's Alisa, Andy.
Alisa?
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
I am a nightmare.
Even worse, dude. My last name is even harder.
Well, I'll get Alisa right from now on, I promise.
Oh, I don't care. I
do.
Okay.
I want to call you by everything. All right, so Alisa. So if I say, Alisa, how much is 2 + 2? You say, I can figure that out, 4. Let's say you came to me and you're profoundly anxious and depressed. And I say, Alisa, how come you're anxious and depressed? And you'd say, if I knew the answer to that question, I would not be coming to see you. So we could say the wisdom of the conscious mind is very limited. So we'll give it the power of 1, okay? Then there's a second kind of wisdom. We call it the wisdom of the unconscious mind. So Alisa has a dream, or an image comes to Alisa, or Alisa says something and says, why did I say that? Or something, right? Now, either it's a deeper level of wisdom or it doesn't exist, because even if Alisa is very good with dreams, if she tries to figure it out, she ain't going to get very far. So she would have to find the one who understands dreams. So it's either deeper or it doesn't exist. And I'd say it's way deeper. I think dreams are like letters from your soul, kind of.
Yeah.
And I would say if conscious wisdom has the power of 1, the wisdom of the unconscious mind has the power of the speed of light. It's that much bigger.
Is it you
then there's the third level.
Is it your higher self, rather?
It's your higher self.
Okay.
Which is really about soul. Then there's another level of wisdom, which is called the third level of wisdom. It's more about spirit than soul, if I was going to make a distinction. And the third level of wisdom, there's a lot of good words in the East. So it's called Qi if you're in China, like Tai Chi. Or if you're in Japan, it's called Ki, like Reiki. Or if you're in India, it's called Prana or Shakti, depending on your circumstances. Or if you're in any Aboriginal culture, you'll have a name for it. The only people who didn't have a name for it was us, who have had all this logical, wonderful, rational West.
The
All
rest
right. So
of the world.
well, yeah, the rest of the, yes, the us. So you could either, so what our name for it would be really, it's a body wisdom. It's the wisdom and energy that animates us. That's what Qi is. It's our life force, and it's also our deepest intuitive knowing. And I'll tell you how we know about that. One way we know about it is when you just know something is true.
Oh, I
right?
feel that from time to time.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So let's say you say, I know what I have to do after this terrible thing that happened to me. I have to start doing this thing. And people say, are you crazy? You're a doctor. You're going to do this. You're nuts. And you say, I may be nuts, but I know it's the right thing for me. And I'm going to do it anyway. That's one way you can know about it. I'll tell you another way you can know about it since you're a mother and you've had, let's suppose you're a mother and you're as big as you are and a car rolls over your toddler. And you have to pick that car up to get
Not
that
gonna
toddler up.
freaking do it. Yeah.
You can freaking do it, even if it's a 2,000-pound car, and even if you weigh like 1/20th it. And women do it all the time. And when you ask them, how did you do that? You know what they say? They just said, I just knew I could do it.
Wow.
Right? They don't figure it out. They don't have an emotion about it. They just say, I just know.
So it's the wisdom of the body, the Qi
right,
of the body.
It's the wisdom of the body. And that wisdom knows everything. And what I want to say to you is that's what's so interesting about it is virtually everybody, when you're aligned with the truth, when you do something or say something that's true for you, you get way stronger. And when you do or say something that isn't true for you, you actually get way weaker. And so what I do is I use that and I say, we're going to ask that level of wisdom, the one that just knows, to reveal itself. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to ask a question, and I'm going to press on your arm. You do it in 5,000 ways, but I'm going to press on your arm. And if your arm stays strong, that means for most everybody, the answer is yes. And if your arm relaxes, it means the answer is no. And then I can ask anything. Things I could ask things in a language you don't know. I could ask about concepts you've never heard of. And that wisdom knows.
Well, okay, so let me ask you a quick question. How does the higher self, that second, the subconscious or unconscious, work together? I mean, how does it relate to the body, the third, form of wisdom? How do they interact or interrelate? Or do they?
It's like I can answer your question. It's going to take us in a funny direction, but I can answer your question. It's like there are 4 people that are teams and they're all working on slightly different vibrations. Okay. So it's like octaves. And so there's you that's interacting with soul, that's interacting with spirit, that's interacting with all of life, you could say. Okay. And the first one is sort of like literal. It's what is dense, right? It's matter, right? The second one is sort of when you begin to realize that life is much more than dense, that it's telling you something. It's like giving you symbolic messages or metaphoric messages. It's like when you're beginning to turn from a noun into a verb, okay? The third one is qualities of being. It's not narrative at all. The second one is kind of narrative. It's like if your soul wants you to know something, it has to give you a story. The third one, that body wisdom, is just qualities of being. It's like qualities of joy or peace or equanimity or omniscience. They're qualities. They're just visceral. They're like you could say they are the names of God. Okay, it's different aspects. The third level is
down my body.
Yeah. So it's like the third level is like that. The fourth level is infinite. And you asked the question about whether you can do this at a distance or not. And I'm going to answer your question because in the fourth level, you know one thing, which is that if I were going to say it this way, I'd say your life, everything is life, and we're all in relationship with life. Okay?
With
That's called the
life,
truth.
L-I-F-E, or light,
Life.
L-I-G-H-T?
Well, because I don't know what people believe. So if people don't believe, if people are atheistic, I'll talk with them and I'll never mention the word light or source or anything because their belief structures are none of my business.
Well,
But
most of my people do know that everything is light. Everything is energy. I mean, Einstein called matter frozen, light. So, yeah.
well, I will tell you something. I think that who you are, when you think that you're Alisa, you're frozen energy. It's not who you truly are. Who you truly are is pure energy.
Yeah,
Okay? And as
absolutely.
soon as you identify with being Alisa, you go from being pure energy, which is C squared, which is the third level, to one, the power of one, and you think you are your body. And so you could say you are to life what the dense energy you feel in your body is to you. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So, and what freedom is essentially is choosing to be who you truly are.
Oh, yes.
And the way to choose to be who you truly are, I can talk to you about if you're interested. But you asked me another question first, which is, can you do this remotely? And in order to know about why you can do it remotely, I have to tell you about the fourth level. All right. So in the fourth level, everything is all happening simultaneously. Everything that has ever happened, is happening, and could ever happen is all happening right now, which is why when you say, how could something travel faster than the speed of light, right, which you can prove that things, quote unquote, travel faster than the speed of light, how could that be? And the answer is because it's not traveling. It's happening everywhere simultaneously, okay? Now, there are two metaphors for that. Do you want me to do work with you, or you want me just to keep talking with you?
I think we need to have several sessions. This is absolutely fascinating. I think you can do work with me at a later time, but I think you have a lot of topics that should be covered and be on its own. If we make them too long, also, people don't have time to listen to super long YouTubes, and they're most
All
of
right.
them.
Well, then I'm
Me,
going to tell
they
you
have
about the
the
fourth
attention
level.
span of a gnat embryo. But
All right. Well, then I will do a session with you at some other point,
yeah,
and you can experience it, which will be a joy to do with you.
And then also, I would like to have you explain enneagrams in another session. But let
I
me
can do
ask
that
you,
too.
because I have a few people to refer to you.
Well, wait. Let me tell you.
Can you help with abandonment issues?
I can help.
And then before I forget.
We can help with everything.
Okay, good. Now, go for it. Sorry to interrupt.
All right, now let's talk about that fourth level where everything is infinite. There are two
Yeah.
kinds of metaphors that really help with that, depending on whether you like biology or energy. I'll give you both of them, okay? The biological metaphor is the relationship of cells and bodies, okay? Now, we have about 3 trillion cells, okay? And theoretically, if you studied all of them, I've been told this by people who know a lot more about this shit than I do. Do you mind if I say shit?
I don't care. I love the
I didn't think
F-bomb.
so. Anyway, so we have about 3 trillion cells, and if you studied them theoretically, you'd never find two that were exactly alike, right? So each of them is unique. On the other hand, all of them have to be on one level exactly the same. Because if you had enough information, you could take one cell and you could clone its whole universe. You could take one cell and clone the whole body. So on that level, the template, the blueprint of everything is happening right now in every cell. Now, of course, if you identify with the cell, if you can see me, over here, there's a cell over here, and over here, there's another cell over here, and it says, oh my God, we didn't even know that existed. We thought the whole universe was just here. This is 50 million light years away, right? But at another level, everything that's happening here has to be happening here simultaneously, right?
Right.
It just depends on whether you're focusing on the unique or you're focusing on the blueprint, all right? So the other metaphor for that, which is what I think cells are, is a hologram. So if you take a hologram, right, a holographic plate, and you drop it into 3 trillion pieces, or how many people there are, right? What do we know about holographic plates that you drop? Every one of the pieces will look different. They're like snowflakes. You'll never find two that look as the same. But each one holds the whole universe.
You remember
right?
those skull holographic, skull necklaces? Eric
Yes.
uses that. And by the way, Eric loves that you curse because he has a sailor tongue. But uh,
I would have a great
you are a whole and part of God, and so if you have or source that skull holographic
time.
necklace and you break it on the ground, well, say it has a picture of you, break it on the ground. If you look close enough, even if you need a microscope, the tiniest ones, you're going to see yourself there too, in every single piece, whole and
In
part,
every single
holographic.
piece.
Yeah, I totally get
So
it.
what I want to say is, here's what I think we are. What we are is mystical cells or mystical pieces of a hologram. You could say we're mystical cells in a mystical body called life.
Yeah.
Or you could say we're mystical little pieces of a hologram in a mystical hologram called life.
Mm-hmm.
So each of us is unique, and each of us is the whole universe.
That's right.
That's what,
We're whole and
when
part
Blake
of
says,
God, and God is all there is. God is
right.
everything. God, yeah. And that's why
And
there's no
that's
hell.
why, what?
And that's why
Exactly.
there's no hell. There
There's
cannot
no
be.
hell. There can't be hell. Of course not, because it's just everything
Yeah.
in God.
Yeah.
Everything, right?
Right.
Everything. And when we don't think something is God, then there's one person who has a problem, and it's not the person that we think isn't God.
Yeah.
It's us. So our work is to say, I am all of it.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we're free, because then someone could say, we're going to crucify you. And you'd say to them, okay, you think you're killing me, but you can't kill me because it'd be trying to kill God. So it's God trying to kill God. The only difference between me and you is you're blind. You don't know who you are.
That is such a powerful concept that can go in so many directions. For example, if we understand that we are a collective, that we're all one and the same, then you got to think about if you're going to hurt somebody, even if it's just hurting their feelings, you're going to hurt the collective. So you're going to hurt yourself. So if we could all live and practice that oneness, that knowledge that we are all one, whole and part of God, one with each other, the world would be a lot better place.
If we could all practice it,
Yeah.
the world would be what's called perfection.
Yeah.
We would have a revelation, and we would realize, we'd have a realization, and we were realizing that all of life is us, and we're
Yeah.
all of life, and so is everything else. And then we'd always be saying, you know, on that level, the golden rule really works. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, as long as you know that they're also in their uniqueness. So the way they might know it may be different than you. So really what it ought to say from that point of view, until you get to the very end, is do unto others as they would have you want them to do unto them, right? You know, but anyway, it's all God. It's
Yeah, it's separation, just like scarcity. Separation and scarcity are complete illusions.
right
But
now.
we need them.
What,
We need them to have the human experience, though.
of course, you know why? I think I can tell you why I believe that's true.
Okay.
What is the one thing that the infinite can't do?
Experience.
Experience, exactly.
That's what Erik uses, the brownie analogy. The one, all that is, God, source, whatever you want to call it, can understand a brownie. Okay, you can read a recipe and whatever, look at a picture, but you really don't totally know what a brownie is until you bake it, mix the ingredients, bake it, frost it, and take a bite. You have to have organic chemistry in the lab with it.
So, in other words, in order to be, I'll tell you how I understand that, right? The one thing that the infinite can't experience is relationship.
Yeah.
Because if you're everything, you can know relationship exists. You can even create relationship, but you
Yeah.
can't experience relationship.
Because you have to have a separation
In
to
order
have
to
a
have a
relationship, right?
relationship, right? So if God wants, so from that point of view, you could say God is infinite but limited, which is a really funny idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the only way God could become unlimited is through creating something that was limited. And by creating something that's limited and you could have all experience, then you could say the divine becomes infinite and unlimited. And I think that's what life is doing through us. And that's why I think we long for each other. Life longs for us like we long for life. And our work is to become self-aware divinity.
Wow. And now Erik says that we are here to remember, because we already conceptually understand it, that we are love, and we're here to experience every single facet of love, including forgiveness, which means we might have to be betrayed, or loyalty, and all the
like we are like twins, because that's what I've been saying for 25 years. What is our work? Our work is to remember. That was our first line, is to remember that which has been dismembered. So to remember just means remembering, and whole and healing are all the same word. We are here to remember who we truly are. Now, it's very interesting what Erik says, you know, because think about what we say about God. Think about it for a second. It's very interesting. There's a word for it. God knows everything. It's called omniscience, right? There's a word for God can do anything. It's called omnipotence. You know what there isn't a word for that's the equivalent? All-loving.
Oh, wow.
So we have these two words, and I think what you could say what evolution is about is to get the third of the Trinity, which is all-lovingness, right? And then you have the true Trinity, you know. And so how do you become all-loving? Jesus says, right, or Christ says, when two or more are gathered, there is love. There is the possibility when two or more, not one, when two or more are gathered, there is love. So what is our life about? Our life is about learning love. And to learn to love means to say, I am you. So how could I not love you? That's the message. The heart message is that, to say, I can be with you in everything.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I mean, in me, I learned a lesson of love from what I went through as a child. Compassion. That's a facet of love, and nurturing, and well, I guess becoming assertive, which is a form of self-love, right?
Of course.
So those are
I mean, compassion is such an interesting word, you know, because what is compassion? You know, the literal, I mean, we think about passion like I'm passionate about something, right? Well, what's really passion? We say the passion of Christ. The word passion means suffering.
Oh,
right?
really?
Yes, the passion of Christ means the suffering of Christ.
Oh, yeah.
And compassion means to be with suffering. So when we can be with suffering, which means to be with what we couldn't integrate, so we can be free to remember who we truly are, then there's love. And so what is the healing work about? It's to remember ultimately who we are, which is everything. We are our unique version of everything. And that's
everything is light, and everything is love. Love is all there is. It's an energy, just like it is the energy.
Right. And that's easy to know mentally and hard to know in the heart.
Yeah, and hard to live.
It's very hard to live because, you know, when somebody, you know, it's very hard, you know, to go from why hast thou forsaken, as an example, why hast thou forsaken me, to like, they're just blind. They don't understand.
Yeah.
But we can be with them with acceptance. So there's the exemplar there for us, you know, of saying like, this is not an easy journey to get to the top of that mountain, because like, as an exemplar, even right before we die, we're still saying, why are you doing this to me? Right? At which point, there's a lot of things going on, right? There's confusion, there is terror, there's rage, there's despair. And then ultimately we can go into a place where the heart softens and we say, I remember.
Yeah, it's nice. I think that's kind of a great place to close. I don't want to go over an hour because I don't want, I mean, people have a hard time watching YouTubes that are longer than an hour, but I do want to ask you a really important question. How did you deal with your colleagues with all this? Because I mean, most of your colleagues might not have, I mean, so many people don't understand these things the way you and I do.
here's what I'd say. I meet people where they are.
Ah,
If you say, I mean, let's take something simple. I'm telling you a story about, being a deer who had its leg cut off, and that's why I have arthritis. And someone's telling that story, and people think that's crazy, right?
yeah.
Well, I'd say to therapists, you ever heard of play therapy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, in play therapy, what are children doing? They're telling a story that is the most elegant story, the most powerful, simple story that reveals what they have to share.
Mm,
Okay?
yes.
So if you want to say I'm a traditional therapist, I'll say just think of it as play therapy. And kids love doing this way more than typical stuff because kids love to tell stories, and we all do. All right. And much of this is finding stories. All right. So I'd say be anyone. If you're an atheist and you say, I've heard about you, you're the devil incarnate, never mention the word God or light or anything, I'll say, great. What quickens you? And someone says, like, oh, when I heard Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, I say, be that.
Oh,
I
that's
don't care.
elegant. That is very elegant. Well, what I tell people who are skeptics, and I do not proselytize. If they want to know, if they come to me, if they solicit information, I share two things with them.
Mhm.
One is from Dr. Thomas Campbell, the writer of the trilogy My Big TOE, Theory of Everything. He said we're like our intestinal bacteria. For all we know, the bread that comes down to us is manna from heaven. We don't understand that seeds have to be sown, crops rotated, transportation to the mill and making of the bread, and the global economics of wheat. Yet it still exists.
Right.
And also, I share with them Arthur Schopenhauer's beautiful quote. Truth goes through three phases. First, it's ridiculed, and oh boy, I get a lot of that. Next, it's scorned, but eventually it's accepted as self-evident. And I think what you and I believe in is going through those three phases. And just like when everybody thought the world was flat, we had to go through those phases in order to get to the knowledge, the absolute truth that the world is round.
Yes, I think that's really true. And all I would say is you have to meet people where they are, and then you can
Yeah.
see what it is. So what you say makes total sense to me. And what I'd say is this. You and I, insofar as we are at all identified with Andy or Alisa, we can't have infinite perspective. So we just don't know.
No.
We have to be comfortable with the not knowing and saying, I may not know what's going on here because I may not be able to get to that mountaintop yet. So I'll have to sort of take it on some kind of skeptical faith. I love skeptics. I say to skeptics, here's what I'd say to you. I love skepticism because, like, why should you believe me? You've known me, people on that, on your show know me for an hour. Why believe me? So I would say be skeptical and be curious and check it out for yourself. And if
Exactly.
what I have people who come to me and they say, what you're saying, it sounds crazy to me. I say, great. If it's useful to you, you won't care. And if it isn't, you won't care. So I love skeptics.
Well,
I love them.
I used to be a skeptic before Erik died. I remember when my sister Denise, her best friend said, "Oh, I'm now a Reiki master," and I asked what that was, and I thought, "Oh my God, this girl is nuts." And when you talk to me about mediums or psychics, it would conjure up this image of a gypsy hunched over a crystal ball. Well, was I ever wrong? Like, you're right. We
Against
don't know the
gypsies and
infinite,
crystal
but
balls.
the journey is fun. I mean, it's so awesome to have our journey to the ultimate. So how can they get in touch with you? Because you are a fascinating man, and we have so much work to do together. Seriously.
You got a little bit cut off there. Could you say it again?
Yes, sir. How can people get in touch with you? Because you and I have so much work to do together and share. It's just awesome.
Thank you. I feel the same, and I'm really moved. The best way to get in touch with us is I run an institute. The best way to do that is people can, if they want to call up the institute, they can do that. The phone number is 781 891 7448.
Okay. And the
They
website
can,
is?
the website is, we're in between websites. Our new website is lifecenteredtherapy.com. So it's lifecenteredtherapy.com.
Mhm.
Our old website, which is still available, and we still have some articles on it that aren't on the new website yet, is guidedselfhealing.org. So it's lifecenteredtherapy.com, and the old one that we're transitioning from is called guidedselfhealing.org. And people can look that up. If they want to email us, the best way to do it is they can write to info@lifecenteredtherapy.com. And if they want to learn more about us, you know, we give away everything sort of like, and if you want to train with us, you can train with us, and we do trainings for people. We do long trainings, and we teach you the basics of this in one day, and I teach about the Enneagram, which we'll talk about some other day. And we run healing circles, because it's amazing to do this thing not just one-on-one, which is one experience, but to do it in a whole collective. And then the collective becomes the body you're working with. So everybody, it's sort of like the arm says something, and the nose says something, and the brain cell says something, and the little toe says something, and it's all part of the same thing. And then we can work collectively. So we can do it, you know, we can all do it together. It's a
We
great
could
thing.
have a Channeling Erik event in my house, or even thinking about doing a cruise and have you as in the center stage. You could help so many people. And yeah, I think that would be awesome. But anyway, I'll email you some ideas. And thank you so much for this. You're such a light worker. I really appreciate you.
Well, as they say in our world, takes one to know one.
Oh, that's sweet. All right.
Okay, good.
Bye-bye.
Bye.